Well, hello and welcome to this episode of the SchoolVibe podcast. My name is Daryl Loy. I am the host, and I am also the founder of the Modern Learning Collaborative, a consulting and coaching organization here to help you and your school, your institution, understand what modern learning is, what modern learning environments look like, and here to help you evaluate the programs, the courses, the classes, and things like that that you are currently offering that could take advantage of this idea of modern learning and modern learning environments where we are preparing kids for the realities of and success in the modern world. So that's the purpose behind the Modern Learning Collaborative. And that stretches from anything from the base level infrastructure, the technology infrastructure that you have in your schools, foundational to this kind of work. If that is an issue for you, for your institution, that is something that we can help with. We will help you through a more traditional technology audit, if you will, where we take a look at the core infrastructure, the things that you have in place, how well that stuff works in order to host and or be available for the teachers in the classroom and the things that they want to do from a modern learning perspective. So lots of tools out there, lots of hardware, lots of software tools, lots of ways that you can introduce modern learning tools and techniques in, I would say, pretty much every curricular aspect of your school. So even if you're a PE teacher, I've got ways, I've got ideas, I've got ways that you can introduce aspects of education technology and technology in general, that would augment and enhance the kinds of things that you are doing and teaching your kids about physical education, physical fitness, that kind of thing. So don't think for a moment that modern learning and modern learning environments and technology in general does not apply to the work that you do. It most assuredly does, and I can help you with that for sure. Today's episode, I've got several articles. I'm not going to get to all of them, I would imagine, because I've got some interesting conversations here, some interesting articles, and just some things that I'd really like to share and talk about in terms of education technology and particularly modern learning as it applies to the educational institutions in our country. And this is public education, this is private education, this is charter schools, this is any combination, this homeschool, this is any combination of education, and that general concept of helping kids and preparing them, as I said earlier, for the realities of and success in the modern world. So these articles apply to all of that. I'm focusing today, though, on artificial intelligence. You know, it's been a couple of years now since ChatGPT was released into the wild, and definitely took education by storm. No question about that. I recall a number of meetings with our middle school division head, particularly at the time, and just overall leadership around the school I was at the moment. When ChatGPT was released, what is it? What does it mean? What does it mean for education? What does it mean for our kids? How does that all work even? So it's, I don't know that it has, that the implications, I don't know that the sort of the use of it, I don't know that any of that has slowed down a great deal. Don't know how much of that we've talked about on the show in the past, but I've got a couple of articles I found interesting over the week, and thought I wanted to share those today. So I'm getting the first two articles I want to share for sure are coming from Education Week. And let me just stop and say that if you do not subscribe to Education Week, I highly recommend it. Great, great, great articles within their publications. Always good stuff. And I think even these two articles that I have collected here are even by the same writer at Education Week. Anyway, highly recommend that. So take a look at Education Week, subscribe to that. It's not expensive. You can do a 2-week free trial to start with, and it's well worth the investment. You know, while I'm on that topic, let me just also say I was having a conversation with my son, who is a programmer developer, and we were discussing. I'm kind of in the market for a new tool to help manage social media feeds. I've used in the past Hootsuite, and some of these platforms have some scheduling capabilities built into them, but I was a huge fan of Hootsuite for a number of years, used it quite a bit, even subscribed and paid for an early version of it so that I could manage a few more accounts at the same time. And then, wow, they just went nuts on their pricing. Just went through the roof. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was orders of magnitude different in their annual fees to use their service. And so I unfortunately bailed on that. Um, just I just didn't see the value in it for me personally at that juncture. I was not had not yet started the Modern Learning Collaborative, so was not using social media and those kinds of posts in a revenue sort of situation. I was simply doing it to share content. And so I just didn't see the value in it at that point for me. But I'm looking at those again today and noticed that a number of them are very expensive. I really didn't find any of any substance that was free. And so I talked to my son again, who's a developer, programmer type, and I said, "What's the deal? You know, why are these so expensive?" And he said right off the bat, he said, "You know, we have moved beyond the age of free. And the reason these applications, these tools tend to charge more these days is because the in this particular case with tools that help you share social media posts, they are charging because the platforms are now charging to have access to their it's called APIs or application program interface to the basically the software that lets a Hootsuite type tool communicate with Twitter, with Facebook, with LinkedIn. All of those platforms have these APIs, which is software for lack of a better or more simplistic term, and that allows them to communicate between the software, the Hootsuite type software, and those platforms. And those platforms are now charging, and that makes perfect sense in a digital economy, the kind of digital economy that we're looking at and talking about. And there was a time, I've been around the internet long enough to remember there were a number of years where things were pretty much free. It was people were struggling to figure out how to monetize the resources, to monetize things, digital content on the internet. And so what's happened now is that we've moved beyond that, and I think it's completely understandable. All that to say that I think when I first subscribed to Education Week, it was also free. And it's just not a reasonable business model to assume that certainly any resource that has any sort of value to it, to you, in whatever role that you are in, if a tool's got some value to it, I think it's reasonable that they charge for that. Um, when Elon Musk took over Twitter, it began to charge for some of the features that I had used with Twitter for free, but specifically, can't believe I almost said that. Specifically, TweetDeck. So TweetDeck is a great tool for managing my use of Twitter, and I think they still call it TweetDeck. I know, even though they call Twitter X now, but I think they continue. I think they still call it TweetDeck. I'm not sure, but I use it every day. And it was very, very valuable to me to manage conversations, to manage chats, Twitter chats that I enjoy being a part of, to manage accounts that I want to follow. It was just a tool that I had become accustomed to, and really, really found that it enhanced my experience on the platform. And it was something that, again, I was willing to pay for. I'd used it for a number of years. I'm trying to think how many years that's been. I think I was a fairly early adopter to Twitter back in the day. It will tell me on my account. I don't recall what it is right off the bat, but it's been years. I'm going to say at least 10, at least 10, um, probably longer. I can recall being introduced to it at Lausanne Collegiate School in Memphis, Tennessee, when Lausanne used to host their summer Lausanne Laptop Institute, which changed at some point to the Lausanne Learning Institute, which has now gone sort of virtual. I'm not even really sure what else they continue to offer. Anyway, I was there on the campus of Lausanne, and that's where I was introduced to Twitter. And again, it's been at least 10, if not 15 years. It's been a long time. Um, I know it's, I know it's been probably closer to 15. Anyway, so TweetDeck came out. It hasn't been that long. TweetDeck was a tool that was released probably 7 years ago, and I got real used to using it. And when their revenue model changed, and they needed folks to subscribe and to pay for some of these features, that was one that I felt like was important to me. Not only in the work that I was doing at the time as director of modern learning, and sharing content and curating content, but even now in this role as founder of the Modern Learning Collaborative, it is certainly still something that I feel has a lot of value. So all that to say, which was a lot, but that's a little insight to if you have questions, and it sort of gets into what we're talking about today, and this whole concept of artificial intelligence tools. But if you're wondering about that and curious about that, if you're an old guy like me who has been around and has lived through that era of awesome awesome digital tools that are internet based, that were free, that are now not free. That gives you a little insight into why. We're just beyond that, and I don't know that that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw more of that over time. Even with ChatGPT, there is the free version. However, it is, I would say, and the phrase that's been coined a while back, it's called freemium. It is free to a certain degree, and if you're in search of additional functionality, that might open you up to some charges, something that you have to pay for. And I think I shared a couple of episodes ago about my wife and her use of ChatGPT to help her do some writing, and how she got to the point she was arguing with it. It wasn't producing what she wanted to produce. And I think I said at the time, well, if you had one of the paid versions, then you probably wouldn't be running into these roadblocks. Certainly, there are resources associated with running tools like ChatGPT, and if you're using the free version, you may be further down the list than folks that are paying for a subscription. So all that, again, to say that Education Week is a great resource. It's not expensive. The quality is there. The articles are phenomenal. I highly recommend it, and we'll talk about a couple of those in this episode. So let's jump into it. Again, a couple of these that came out this week, and they are primarily the ones that I've picked to talk about today are all about artificial intelligence. And this article, the first one, released just yesterday. It's only about a 3-minute read. Released yesterday, and the title of the article is "We're at a Disadvantage," and other teacher sentiments on AI. So I've made some notes here want to scroll through this, and I may get slightly soapbox ish. Forgive me if that rubs you the wrong way, but I am here to help you. That's my ultimate goal, and particularly help the classroom teachers who are out there, and who are quite frankly struggling with some of this technology. And that's a big part of what's behind this article. I've highlighted a few things here. So far more teachers are getting professional development on artificial intelligence, but majority still have received no training at all. And they've got a number of really interesting graphics in here, and I'll get to some of those in just a second. But um, the basic premise of the article and why the title says that we're at a disadvantage relates to that idea of professional development. Goes on to say that 58% of the teachers still have no training 2 years after the release of ChatGPT. And then it says districts have a lot of work to go to get everyone up to speed. So I'm trying to figure out how to sort of address some of this. I feel like I need to address this as we move along, and I have a real challenge with that um, statement there that districts have a lot of work to do to get everyone up to speed. I love a good professional development session. I enjoy going to them, attending them. I enjoy leading them. I've led over my 2 decades in education. I've led a number of professional development webinars, seminars, speaking opportunities. We would do those at every school, as far back as prior to the launch of our very first one-to-one computer program back in the day. We would do professional development at our school. We would also, when we paid for teachers to go to outside training, we would also encourage them to come back and share what they've learned in an internal PD session. So I love a good PD, love to share, and they're great ways to learn. But here's the issue. And frankly, I think it gets back to my overarching issue with school and the work that I do in the Modern Learning Collaborative. My ongoing and overarching issue that school is in desperate need of a transformation. And what I mean by that within this context is that there just simply isn't enough time in the day, the way school is structured today, for enough of these kinds of training opportunities to happen. It just isn't organized in a way that can be done. And that is part of the radical transformation that I believe is in dire need in our educational institutions, private schools, public schools as well. I just believe we need a drastic overhaul, and the work that I do is to not necessarily to flip a switch, as I often say, to make a radical change in education, but let's start moving in the right direction. Let's start implementing some modern learning environments. Let's start getting at the core of our curriculum and use these tools that are available. Use these tools that our students are absolutely going to need in their adult life, in their working life. Let's start incorporating those and preparing them for their future. So the school day is just not designed in a way to support a lot of this professional development that teachers are asking for. And so the crux of this article is that since they just don't have time to do it, there's a large percentage of teachers that just aren't going to use it. and that's unfortunate. And that is, in my opinion, um, something that we need to change, because I can guarantee you that your students are using these tools. They are absolutely using these tools. And if you, as an instructor, don't understand these tools, you will have a hard time, in my opinion, being able to identify the use of these tools by your students. I tell parents, I tell faculty, I tell pretty much anyone that listen all the time that we need to teach kids how to use these tools, or they could be they could end up being used by the tools. So if you don't understand what's going on, you are more susceptible to some inappropriate, some disadvantaged in some way capacity or work with these tools. So you need to understand it. And I just don't think we're in a position, as rapidly as things change in the technology world, I just don't think we're in a position that you can simply ignore it. I just don't believe we're there any longer. You've um, you've got to understand these tools, and you can't just wait for this magical professional development to roll in and teach you everything that you need to know. It's also been my experience attending a lot of professional development sessions that you often walk away with less than you were anticipating. Sometimes you don't even come away with much new, and that's unfortunate. But that is a danger and a downside, particularly as rapidly as things are progressing. It is possible to walk away from some professional development and just not have gotten anything that you could use tangibly out of that. So I understand the need and the desire for this professional development. But good news. I have good news for you. I have actually great news for you. You're listening to this podcast. There are a number of podcasts that I've listened to just in the last couple months that have a huge focus on artificial intelligence. I'm going to list a few. This is just off the top of my head. I don't have anything written down, so forgive me, but I will put links to these and more in the show notes. But Casey Bell is a Texan. She's based here in the Metroplex as well. We have not had the opportunity to meet, but I listen to her podcast regularly. It's the Shake Up Learning podcast, and she is often, almost every episode, it feels like, sharing some great AI tools, some great AI resources, some great ways to use these tools. And frankly, that's the best way to learn, to jump in, use them, listen to some podcasts like Casey Bell's Shake Up Learning. Listen to Dr. Monica Burns' Easy EdTech podcast. She's sharing tons of stuff. I shared one of the other episodes about some AI prompts for parents. Listen to these guys. My friend Matt Miller, oh my goodness, he has tons of AI related resources. He did a webinar or two probably a year ago now on AI. He's got some books out on the topic. Definitely check those out. As I shared in the last episode, John Sowash, who runs the Chromebook Classroom podcast, he's got a number of resources that he shares. So we're just not in a position where in the world today where you can sit and wait on someone to bring you this content. It's all around you, all around you. So you take advantage of that. You have to take advantage of that. There is so many resources, so many learning opportunities. You can learn so much about these tools um, just with these resources that are out there and available to you. And um, podcasts are a great thing because for you, the listener, they are free. There are sponsors and things like that. So you do have to listen to an ad or two from time to time. I'm not there yet. My podcast is not that big, so I've not attempted to monetize that as of yet. But typically these are free resources that go in depth on these tools. So I get the overall overarching theme of this particular Education Week article is about the lack of professional development, but there are options out there for you, and I just believe you have to jump. You have to jump on those. There's a couple of really good graphs in this article. I'll just talk about a few of those. Um, how much professional development have you received on using generative AI in the classroom? They're basically huge percentages, 58 to 70 some odd percent that say none. And again, that's a unique question. Doesn't mean that they're not using the tools necessarily. It just means that they haven't gotten any formal professional development on that. But this is rather telling here. Which of the following best describes your current use of artificial intelligence driven tools in your classroom? And that's another thing I just want to throw out. ChatGPT is one tool. And you will find that most of the tools that you as educators enjoy using are rapidly incorporating large language models and artificial intelligence into their tools. Canva being one of them. They're huge into this with their Magic Write, their ability to create slides on the fly. They've got AI generative artwork, applications within Canva. So whether you know it or not, basically, you're using a lot of these tools. So again, back to this particular question: which of these best describe your current use? First one just kills me. The first option in this survey is I have never used them and don't plan to start. There's 37% of the respondents chose that. I there's a lot of talk about AI and its implications to education, obviously, or we would be having this conversation. But as I've often alluded to on the podcast, I'm an old guy, and I remember when we were having the same kinds of conversations with respect to Google. I think I've shared stories about the interactions I've had with leaders back in the day when Google burst onto the scene. A lot of the same conversations, and we wouldn't think twice about Google today. We understand what it is. We understand how to use it, and we didn't. No one knew that right off the top of their head back then, and it took some time to learn that, but we all did, and we understand the implications. We understand how to use it. But I can't imagine for a moment that we would not ever want to use Google in our classrooms. It's just not something that I would ever think that we would deal with. Of course we're going to use Google. Of course the kids are going to use Google. Same thing with artificial intelligence. Of course, the kids are going to use AI. It's fascinating. It is fascinating, and it is handy. Um, it can help you significantly in the creative process. So I just don't understand why the largest percentage of respondents in this survey, 37%, said I've never used them and I don't plan to start. That just makes no sense to me whatsoever. So, um, the second largest is I have not used them and do not plan to start this school year, but I do plan to start in the future. Well done. Excellent. Um, Only 2% of the respondents said I use them a lot. Sad. Sad and unfortunate, but you might be asking why? Why why are the teachers not using AI? Well, that was their next question. Um, the next question in the survey, and one English teacher from New York responded when asked why they're not using it. I need to explore AI before I commit to it. Well, this I understand. I absolutely understand. But again, these tools are in use all the time, every day, and they're handy to have. So I understand your need to explore, but do it. It's been 2 years. It's been 2 years since ChatGPT was released. The time for exploration is probably over in terms of really the core exploration and understanding the how it works and how you might be using them. So, um, and that's why this is where the title of the article comes from. I feel like we are at a disadvantage. And it's again primarily because there's not enough time in the day. Let's see. Next survey question. You indicated you do not currently use AI tools in the classroom. Why not? And again, the top respondent is I haven't explored these tools because I have other priorities that are more important. And that again gets back to a lot of the work that I'm doing with the Modern Learning Collaborative. I just don't know that there is more important work to be done. I always quote Dr. Jordan Shapiro in his definition of the purpose of school, and that is really to help kids express themselves using the tools that currently shape their world. And if artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, and those kinds of tools are not tools that are currently shaping our world, I really wouldn't know what else is. So I just don't know. I understand that given the framework that we're unfortunately operating in with respect to how education works today. I totally get it that there are teachers who feel like they have things that are more important, but I question that. I really do. Not that learning to read and write and do arithmetic is not important. It absolutely is. I'm not suggesting you trade one for the other, but I am suggesting that there are ways to incorporate these tools into your core curriculum. And you can do both, preparing your kids for their future and helping them learn how to do long division. A couple of the other high ranking responses, I don't know how to use these tools. My district my district hasn't outlined a policy on how to use the technology appropriately. Was listening to another podcast the other day, not an education podcast, but it was it was a podcast about some tools that were being used in actually in a law enforcement capacity, and mentioned that the old adage, it's often easier to ask for forgiveness than it is to ask for permission. And I think that applies. I think you look. I'm an administrator. I'm a school administrator. Two decades in school administration. I understand how sometimes slow is the MO of administrators when it comes to adopting tools. Certainly do your research, certainly understand how those tools work. But the best way to do that is to jump in and use it, use the tool. So to wait on policies, I think, is a little short-sighted. Use the tools, get to understand the tools, and then you go help set the policy. It would be um, so much easier if that were sort of the model. Now, I understand, and I've always said in my role as tech director, as director of modern learning, that teachers, you guys have a hard job. You do, and it's very demanding. It's very demanding during the day, and as someone who is introducing new tools, new resources, I never want to add more to your plate. The whole purpose of what we're doing is to help you with your core curriculum, your core content. So I'm never going to suggest that you add something to your plate. I'm not going to do that. But these tools are here, and there are ways to dig into them and understand them, and not wait around on policies from your administrative folks. So, as I said at the very top, I apologize. I'm getting a little soapboxy, but these tools are out there in the wild being used, and as a result, though, there are a number of great resources out there for you to learn all about them, And don't want to suggest that you should adopt these tools at face value. And you've got to do your research. You've got to understand what they are, how they work, and that sort of gets into article number 2, to be honest with you, a little bit, because, and I found this one a little bit disturbing. I think that's probably the best way to say it. A little bit disturbing. Another Education Week article, and it is entitled "Don't Buy the AI Hype. Learning Expert Warns." So this article, a little bit older, came out in August, but it was sort of, followed the linked rabbit trail, if you will. Education Week does a pretty good job of that, typically linking within the article you're reading a few other related articles, and that's how I came across this one. This one came out in August of this year, so it's not terribly old, but they conducted they did an interview with this expert, and they also did a survey in the spring as well of educators. And they open the article by saying generative AI can save educators time, help personalize learning, and potentially close achievement gaps, which is all true. It's all absolutely true. But then they go on to say that not everyone agrees. They went to their surveyees in spring, and that survey indicated that a lot of educators are skeptical of the technology. And I think that gets right back to the first article. They're skeptical because they don't understand it. I'm skeptical of things that I don't understand. That is a natural response to new things. So the easy solution to that is understand it. Take some time, read some articles, listen to some podcasts, watch some YouTube videos, and you'll understand why you don't necessarily have to buy the AI hype. And you'll also understand that not all of it is in fact hype. Um, and the reason that this particular professional says that it is hype is things like, well, the reality is that AI has its limits. Absolutely, it has its limits. Every tool has its limits. But as long as you understand those limits and you use the tool with those limits in mind, you'll have success. You will be able to successfully use these tools to improve your day to day. Let's see. For instance, they say also that it could produce inaccurate or biased responses. Well, that's true. The inaccurate is true. The biased responses, I question. If you understand how a lot of these tools are developed, they basically use the whole of pretty much the whole of the internet, if you will, as their large language model. And I don't know that I would assume that the internet is biased in ways that are of significant importance, because as we've talked about on the podcast before, you can find an article on the internet to support whatever position on whatever argument it is that you're trying to make. You can argue both sides, and you can find an article to support them both. I've done it. I've done it. There's articles out there. So to suggest that there's bias, I'm not sure that I believe that there's any sort of inherent bias that would impact anything of significance. I just don't buy that. Inaccuracy, absolutely, because if the internet is anything, it is potentially inaccurate. Again, there's so much information out there on either side of arguments, and whether or not it's actual factual data, well, the AI gen tools, they just don't really care. They just don't. But they use all of that in determining their responses back to you. So, this particular person, who's a founder and CEO of a think tank, he argues that schools don't have to give into the hype just because the technology exists. Well, I would almost disagree with that as well. As I've sort of already alluded to, you don't have to give into the hype, but you do need to understand these tools and use these tools for that very reason, because the technology exists. And it does, and it they talk about this later in the article. It is the future. It's not going anywhere. It's going to continue to grow and evolve. You know, if you've listened to the last few episodes, I've had ChatGPT on the show with me, asking questions and having conversations. And they talk about the fact that it is conversational now. So it sort of can make you think that you're having a conversation with another intelligent being. And you're not. You're absolutely not. You're having a conversation with a tool that hears what you're saying, takes in what you're saying, and then tries to come up with a response based on all of the information that it has in its little brain. But it's not thinking. It's not reasoning. And that's their point down here in the article. It's not capable of thinking. It's not capable of reasoning. It's not capable of understanding that you have a mind and a life and ideas, and you might have some misconceptions. It doesn't care. And in a lot of my use of these tools, I've also noticed that more often than not, the deeper I get into a topic, the more the tool just tends to parrot what I have said, what I have asked it for, or what I have said in our conversation, if you will. So the art of the prompt is the biggest learning curve, I think, to using these tools, and then understanding again that it is in fact inaccurate. And I think people like this gentleman who suggests that we shouldn't buy into the hype. I think he sells educators short, way short, in fact, because he seems to think that you're just going to use this tool and run with it. And that's just not the case. You may ask it for a lesson plan on a particular topic for a particular grade level, and you're going to look at that and you're going to evaluate that. You're going to use your human brain to evaluate that, something that the AI is incapable of doing. And you understand that. And I just feel like a lot of these people who are concerned about these tools just assume that you're not going to use them in a reasonable way. Well, teachers are pretty smart. Teachers, that's not, I don't think that's revolutionary. Teachers are just pretty smart folks, and they understand that there's some evaluation that has to happen with these tools. You're not just going to have it write you something and send it out to all your parents or send it out to all your kids. You're not going to do that. But they're great tools to get you started. I've used them frequently to get over sort of a mental roadblock, a mental speed bump. If I'm struggling to write something, I may go and ask some of these large language models some questions, and their responses, while canned and while not thinking about it or anything of that, no intelligence behind it, their canned responses can often help me make it over that speed bump and help me think about a topic in a different way, shape, or form. And there's the value. There is the value. It can save so much time when attempting to develop things um, like your lesson plans, like your outline for your discussion on specific topics. And if there's some things that it pops up that you as the subject matter experts look at it and say, I didn't know that. Well, here's your opportunity to go and look that up and not just take it for granted. And you're not going to do that. I wish I could sit down with this guy and tell him, look, teachers are a lot smarter than that. They understand the issues around these tools. So yeah, it's an interesting article. I will post a link to it in the show notes, but I disagree with a lot of it. He ends up actually with a few things that I do agree with him on. The last question was around the idea of AI literacy in schools, and asked the interviewer asked him if he thought that was something that he thought was important. And his response was, well, it depends on what you mean by AI literacy. And I would agree. I think AI literacy is probably a bit too narrow. What I have talked about with all my schools in the recent past is more digital literacy. It's a more widespread literacy around the use of digital tools, and it's not just artificial intelligence. Certainly, that is a digital tool and one that you need to be aware of. But frankly, all the tools that I'm using here to to stream this podcast, to record this podcast. All of these are digital tools. And I think there is a huge amount of work to be done in terms of literacy around all of these. And that was one of the most successful things we launched at Good Shepherd was our media arts classes, where we take the time to help kids understand how these digital tools work and how you might apply them in and around the curriculum and around the work that you do as students. So I would open that up a little more broadly, and I say that many experts are calling for actual digital literacy, which would include AI, but not exclusive to AI. That's certainly part of it. But he ends up saying, I want people to be critical thinkers about this technology. And I couldn't agree more. I want all users to be critical thinkers about all technology. I can't say it enough. These tools are here. It's just like, as I alluded to earlier, when Google came out, it was here. It wasn't going to go away. Time has proven didn't go away. Artificial intelligence is going to be the same way. This camera that I'm using, same way. This Rodecaster Pro that I'm using, same way. This microphone, these tools. This microphone is a classic. It's been around for years. There are now tools that have been created to allow it to be used in a much more efficient manner. But it's all part of that digital literacy and how to use these tools. And it's all part of, again, my mantra behind the Modern Learning Collaborative is preparing kids for the realities of and success in their future. So, all right, just got to two of those. But on this topic of AI, I do want to share one more thing. You guys may or may not know, I think you know, that there is an organization that I have been a part of in the past called ATLIS, ATLIS. It is the Association of Tech Leaders in Independent Schools, and it's a great organization around the use of technology in independent schools. There's an annual conference. I've spoken at it. I conducted a panel conversation just last year around the concept of modern learning, what that is, and how that could be implemented and or used within the curriculum in your schools. I was thrilled to share the stage with a couple of true legends in this world of education technology, Hiram Cuevas and Jason Kern. Jason's a great friend. And in fact, Jason's where I, let's say appropriated, not stolen, but appropriated the title Director of Modern Learning. He was the first one that I knew of that had that title. But anyway, I shared the stage with Hiram and Jason, and we had a great conversation. And I think a lot of folks there, it was well attended. There were a ton of people in the room. And I think we had a great conversation. I think we opened the eyes of some folks, and I say that because we had a lot of folks come up after the panel was over and want to continue the conversation, and have still continued those conversations. But anyway, so I've been a part of ATLIS. There is a conversation. There's an AI meetup that ATLIS is hosting, and I wanted to share this, and I'll put a link in the show notes as well. But it's an AI meetup sharing successes and overcoming challenges. So it's being led by Dr. Maggie Renken, and I know Maggie. Maggie and I were both interviewed for an article that ATLIS put in their Access Points magazine. It's a quarterly production, a quarterly publication, and I want to say it was the fall of 2023, I believe, when that article came out. But it was all about this concept of modern learning and the Department of Modern Learning, and is that the next iteration of the IT department, which is sort of the genesis for me behind the idea of the Department of Modern Learning and my title as Director of Modern Learning at the last two schools I was part of. And interestingly enough, Maggie's title now at her school is in fact Director of Modern Learning as well. So well done, Maggie. I think she's incredibly intelligent, incredibly intelligent behind this concept of modern learning. But she's hosting this conversation about artificial intelligence. It is going to be held Wednesday, November 20th of 2024. So depending upon when you're listening to this, it may or may not have happened yet. But I'm going to post a link to the conversation. You have to register for it, but as far as I can tell here, it is open to the public. ATLIS and Maggie both shared it on LinkedIn, and so I will share the link to that as well. But let me just read real quickly the blurb. Join ATLIS for a community-driven discussion on AI in independent schools, hosted by Dr. Maggie Renken, Director of Modern Learning at Rabun Gap. I'm going to mess this up because I can never remember how to pronounce this. Nacoochee, School. This session offers a platform for tech leaders to share their experiences from successes in implementation or implementing AI tools to the challenges that they have faced along the way. I think it sounds like a great conversation. I may well register for it myself. Got to look at my calendar, see if that's going to work for me. But I highly recommend it. Maggie, as I said, is very sharp. ATLIS has got some great resources for those of you out there who are in independent schools. Certainly take a look at the things that they have to offer. They do host these public meetups on a regular basis, so would highly encourage you to take a look at that. All right. So this edition has been, or this episode rather, has been a real focus on artificial intelligence, and I think it'll be a while. We'll continue to talk about this stuff for a while before we are 10, 12, 15 years down the road past its implementation, as we are with Google, before we sort of stop having these kinds of conversations, and there'll be something else new that we'll have conversations about. But let me just wrap up by saying these tools are fantastic from a productivity perspective. They can help you so much with being more efficient and more effective in so many areas of your day-to-day. So I highly encourage you to take a look and take some time and try these new tools out. My friend Chris Nesi and his House of EdTech podcast, his tagline for the House of EdTech used to be, you may not, now I'm going to struggle with it. Sorry, Chris. Education technology is not hard. Just give it a try. And that's what I'd say about AI. It's not hard, but give it a try. Give it a try, and you will quickly begin to understand its strengths and its inherent limitations as well. So thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the broadcast and podcast, broadcast, whatever you want to say. But appreciate you joining, and we will see you next week. So, ta-ta for now.